Hello and welcome to the Double Clutch podcast. I'm Mike Miller, one of your usual hosts in a less than usual situation. And to my left, I'm joined by Mr. Nick Whitfield.
What's up, guys? Good to be back. Days away from the NBA restarting.
Days away. And just below me, you will see Mr. Josh Coyne.
Greetings from my own personal Disney World.
And making, the wizard behind the curtain making this all happen is Mr. Kurt Killick. Thank you for watching, tuning in, listening, however you are consuming this. Bit of housekeeping before we start. If you're not already, make sure you're following us at Double Clutch UK on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. If you're on Discord, follow us, discord.me/Double Clutch. And if you're listening to this and not watching us live on Twitch right now, we are twitch.tv/Double Clutch. That's all that out of the way. Let's talk some NBA action. As Nick alluded to, we are just a couple of days shy from the restart of the NBA season, and we've seen some pre-season games. We've seen some of them already. Just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the look and the feel of how this game has gone, because actually they've been off longer than the actual season was going on for at this point. So it's been a pretty long layoff. Nick, what have your thoughts been so far on these scrimmages?
It's interesting. I think they look actually a lot better than I was expecting. I think they've done a really good job with projecting who the home team is, for example, with the lights around the court. And I thought it might feel more jarring not having crowd noise, but that doesn't seem to. I'm just not hyper conscious of it as I'm watching games. And I think the other thing, I think they've been very clever with the angles that they've used in terms of not showing sort of non-court areas. It's a slightly higher angle than you'd normally see. So it's actually like looking down at the game. So you only see the court and the players, basically. And the addition of Railcam, which I think we'll talk about more later, but I'm a huge fan.
Josh, what's your reactions been to these rust disposing games?
So I agree. I agree with a lot of what Nick just said. I really have enjoyed the scrimmages so far. I think they've done a great job in the current circumstances. I've enjoyed the little touches, like Nick said, about creating that home court image with the graphics around the court. I think there's another thing is as well. I think they've set like quite a good precedent by taking the distancing seriously courtside, which, while it may not necessarily be crucial within the bubble at that point because they're all safe, but it does set a good example to the audience. But mostly, though, similarly to Nick, I'm surprised by how easy it was to get over the lack of a crowd. I'm not sure whether it's because I've had a month's head start, as have many in this country, of watching Premier League football, but after 5 minutes, I don't even really think about it. And in fact, I see it almost as a positive that in this current circumstance, we get to see the best basketball in the world, in a personal, intimate pickup environment. And I guess it's like music. You can see your favorite band in these like big venues with this high production value as much as you want, but sometimes you do crave an acoustic session from here to then. So I'm saying that this NBA restart is the NBA's acoustic session.
What you're saying about crowd noise is NBA Unplugged. So I get what you're saying about the lack of crowd noise, and I didn't notice it until one particular instance, and it was, I don't know if you saw the clip, but the Bucks were playing, I can't remember who they were playing actually, but Giannis drove right, went up in a double team, and then over his head, just perfect pass out to Robin Lopez, who surprisingly Robin hit the three. And my initial reaction was, that sort of like excitement. And then I stopped. I caught myself in my tracks because there was no crowd reaction. And I thought I'd seen what had happened. I thought, oh, maybe he was blocked then or something. And then the replay showed it. And because I couldn't feed off the live crowd, I completely doubted what I'd actually seen with my eyes. And that was the only point I noticed it. Obviously, from what you guys are saying, you haven't had similar experiences. I want more player audio. They've got 36 microphones under there, and people have to shout really loud for you to hear them swear. And I kind of want to hear the talk. But what they've done with it so far,
playing more player audio.
yeah, Yeah. You've actually gone really quiet, Nick. Don't know what that is at the minute. First technical issue we're having. Any reaction to any particular team feeds? Because the first Denver Nuggets feed for me was shocking, terrible. Had to turn it over to the other feed, which I think was the Wizards, actually. Josh, is there been any commentary teams that you're not over the moon about seeing back or hearing back through this experience?
Not really. I think just generally I've enjoyed watching teams try and kind of rise to the challenge, because it's obviously such a unique situation. There's a lot more dead air that they have to fill. So I've enjoyed hearing how people do it. I think it's similar to the kind of on-court action in the sense that you almost just can't judge anyone's performance at this point because it's such a freakish scenario. If Mike Breen starts talking waffle for like 5 minutes, I'm not going to think all of a sudden Mike Breen's a bad commentator, but I will think, he has never done this before, as no one else has. So it's another part of the social experiment, I think.
That's fair. I'm obviously just extremely harsh in my judgment of the Denver commentary team. Anything from your perspective on that, Nick?
The thing I find jarring is not necessarily any commentary team in particular, but it's the contrast in quality between games. Because quite often we have two games happening at the same time at the moment. I'm flicking between the two, and it's jarring, the difference between how well one team will cover breaks in the game versus the other one I'm flicking to. And I find that difference more jarring than like maybe if I was just sticking with one.
Yeah, I get that. What did you guys take on the 10-minute quarters for the first game? Did that do anything differently for you, Nick?
Well, I am generally a big fan of FIBA rules anyway, in terms of how it keeps the game like flowing, which obviously has 10-minute quarters. So I personally think it's a good thing. And what I think is if they went to 10-minute quarters in a longer or more permanent way, what you'd actually see is you'd just see a drop in garbage time in terms of just because the game is shorter doesn't mean the stars would have to play fewer minutes for their own conditioning and like protecting them over the season. So you'd actually just get like a higher percentage of the game with the best players in the game. So I mean, I'm not like strongly saying like it should go to 10 minutes, but I don't think there's any drop off for me personally.
So they trialed it before a few years back, Darren Williams, Brooklyn Nets era. They did 10 minutes in the preseason. Josh, do you think this was a test opportunity for them under the guise of it being conditioning to see what it was like? I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Seeing a whole game in less than 2 hours was great from my perspective.
Yeah, I think the situation has offered lots of, across the world, there's been a lot of opportunities that have presented themselves to experiment. And I think, especially with a progressive league like the NBA, they're always kind of, seemingly in the last few years, they've always been open to changes around rules and approaches. So 100% that they would have taken the data on this one. And I think that whilst I think that the main positive of it really was the fact that we didn't have to sit through, 8 more minutes of rusty basketball. So that was my perspective on it. I was quite glad that we were only having 10 minutes of the opening game. And hopefully as the quality picks up, we'll start to enjoy that 48-minute format again.
Nick, you mentioned the rail cam at the start. Impressed with the way they're trying to give an alternative angle. You obviously mentioned keeping the way sort of where the crowd would be. They're keeping it much more focused on the court. Anything you would like to see differently from it at all, or is this what you'd like to see?
The thing I think I don't think we've even seen the best of it yet because it's because the games don't mean anything right now. We're not seeing guys go like all out on the break and like guys chasing them in transition. So a lot of times guys are running up and then holding up and then it's a half-court offense. I think where you'll find it really bring plays to life is where you're getting those contested shots at the rim on a fast break. You can imagine seeing like the famous LeBron block from that kind of angle would be crazy. So yeah, I think the best is yet to come.
Josh, are they capturing a side of the game you haven't seen before?
Yeah, I think so. Now and then there's small snippets of footage that pop up on Twitter from the 90s where people go like, how were they able to do this then, and we don't get it anymore. There's lots of videos of like Jordan turnaround fadeaways that people have fallen in love with throughout the years, and largely they've been rail cam shots in ridiculous ultra HD. So I'm a massive fan of it, and I hope it continues, and I hope that then they adopt it when the league proper continues.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I think it was the 2003 All-Star Game was the one that everyone seems to get around, showing the clips of like Jason Kidd and AI going up and down the court. Okay, so we've had enough games now to sort of gauge where teams are, where players are. Nick, which team has most impressed you so far in their return to action?
I'm actually going to say a team we didn't really talk about a lot last week. I'm going to say Dallas, and in particular the two stars there. On the one hand, it pains me to see Porzingis play well for Dallas as a Knicks fan, but on the other hand, I actually feel like it also bears out what I said about him when he was with the Knicks, in terms of him ideally not being a number one option, but a perfect number 2 or 3 on a championship contender. Doncic has been absolutely crazy with just all aspects of his game, and how complete a player he is at 21 years old is unbelievable, and how he impacts the game in so many ways. He rebounds unbelievably for a guard. He finds passes in with no space, or like that you didn't see yourself as a fan. It's like crazy watching Doncic, and he's one of those guys who I can't help but wonder how much better he can get, because he's so good already. I kind of wonder, does a 25-year-old Doncic, how can he possibly be better than that? But let's see.
It's a scary prospect, and something that the Mavs fans will be sort of licking their lips at. Josh, anyone in particular impressed you player-wise? Let's go.
Yeah, I was mostly impressed that despite his time off, Steven Adams still plays like he eats fire for breakfast, and only trains by chopping trees like in a Rocky montage. But he caused unanswerable problems for the Celtics because they have no size to deal with him the other night. So there was just no matchup defensively. And in only 15 minutes, he kind of similarly overwhelmed the Sixers physically without Embiid the other night. So Adams is definitely my pick. He's been a beast. It was like nothing ever happened for him.
I watched that same game against Boston, and what amazes me about Adams is just how physically strong that guy must be. He runs up the court and just like strolls to the hoop and grabs rebounds as though no one's there. It's crazy.
Just tossing people to the side. Someone we didn't mention, but it's being mentioned a lot on all kinds of social media, is Bol Bol. This is obviously scrimmage games. This is effectively should be treated the same way in fact, probably less than the way we treat Summer League as a way of gauging talent. Are either of you convinced that he is going to be an impactful player once the games become serious, or is this just a case of, look, you caught the Wizards in the first game back after 141 days off? That's sort of it. Josh?
I think he was really impressive. It's a massively, difficult one to judge because it's such a small sample size. But he looked really impressive. His length is amazing. He was really aggressive, quick step. I think there's massive upside, but we need to see a sustained version of that.
Nick,
sorry, that was a boring answer.
That's fine. I'll take it. It's fine.
I think Nick, my reaction is quite a measured. It was cool to see that performance. I enjoyed it, but it is a meaningless game. And what we didn't see the critiques of his game were not exposed in terms of the things you heard him coming into the league. Can he stay in front of a guard on a switch? And in games where no one really cares, or they're not trying to isolate any weak links on defense, you don't see that sort of stuff. So I really hope he carries on this form, and he, as a guy with that kind of length who can shoot like he can, there should be a role in the NBA for him for sure. Mm-hmm. But let's see it in a competitive game.
I mean, the guy has to. I'm not even making a joke. The ceiling for this guy is huge in terms of what he could become with the skill set he's got. But it's just whether he can put it together consistently and whether he can find a role on that team. I was, and I know it is sort of a forced hand through circumstance, but the lineup that team rolled out, just ridiculous. The shortest guy was Jerry Grant at 6'9", and then everyone else 6'11", Plumlee, and then Jokic is 7'2". It was at point guard as well. It was like the most amazing circus trick.
It was like a 2K My Team lineup.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was amazing.
It was tall ball. I'd absolutely love to see them do that in the regular season. Like you just love. I absolutely love it when a team zags whilst the rest of the league zigs. Like Memphis did it for years, and then they became a real fan favorite. And I would absolutely love it if they played like Paul Millsap at the 3.
It's incredible. Fair play to them for rolling that lineup out. And they basically ran with this very similar lineup in their second game too. Let's get in some bubble news then. Zion Williamson has re-entered the bubble. He's currently in the midst of 4 days quarantine, expected to return to the team on Wednesday, as it was reported today. Firstly, that's great that he has been able to sort out the personal issues off the court, the family issue, and get back in. And it's sort of a testament to how seriously the league is treating this, that whilst he was outside the bubble, he was tested every single day. Fingers crossed he hasn't skipped a beat. How huge is this to the Pelicans' chances, Nick?
I think he elevates that team potentially to, if they're going to have any hope, they need Zion firing full cylinders, because without that energy he brings and that switchability on defense, and I just don't think without him they have enough to really push for that last playoff spot.
Nick,
I think it's massive for the league as well, as much as it is for the Pelicans. Many people believe that a lot of the decision making around who gets invited to the bubble was actually shaped around that one man. They were desperate to have more Zion, so they'll be delighted to have him back, and I can't wait to see a healthy Zion violently ripping the ball out of innocent rebounders' hands once again.
So yeah, definitely a huge impact he's going to have. I really hope he can stay healthy. He's obviously had a rocky start to his NBA career. I hope that this hasn't disrupted it at all. One guy who's returned to the bubble is going to be slightly more disrupted is Lou Williams, who returned from, in all respects to his family, returned from a family funeral that he had to leave the bubble for, but is doing 10 days quarantine possibly because he was at a funeral, and that's quite a high vector for transferring the disease, but also possibly because he was photographed at a strip club getting chicken wings. Guys, should we have expected this? Should we have expected this from someone, and who would you have thought it would have been?
Well, my initial response to the Lou story was obviously beyond, sorry for his loss. Hope the Williams family are doing well. But the Lou story just was a reminder that the lifestyle of a professional athlete is just worlds apart from the everyday experience. He treats a strip club the same way I do a tub of Ben and Jerry's. I can convince myself as much as I want that I will behave myself, but if I know it's there, there's just no keeping me away from it. It's just a matter of time. But I was thinking about this, and I was recently watching, in terms of, who else that I would expect to be going to the strip club early. I was watching the JaVale vlog, and I had an unexpected candidate because I saw a different side of Alex Caruso that I'd seen before, where he did a lot of talking about the shape of a woman's behind in that vlog. And I thought, you know what, maybe this guy's a dark horse. So that's my pick. That's who I thought, instead of Lou Williams, maybe going to a strip club on his own.
Nick, was it a responsible thing to do? I mean, he had the mask on.
Well, last week we talked about players inviting young ladies into the bubble. And now we're seeing if they're not allowed into the bubble, they will seek them out outside the bubble. So am I surprised? Not at all. In terms of who I expected it to be, there is still strong speculation. The reason James Harden was late to report in was he was doing a tour of duty, hashtag the last dance.
Like in Lou, I can't believe I'm defending this, but in Lou's defense, he frequents that establishment specifically for chicken, and like actual edible food from a kitchen chicken. To the point where
I'm sure if he's married, I'm sure that's what he tells his wife.
But he's well, I suppose maybe that could be like the big decoy is that he's there so often he has a seasoning. You can order the Lou Williams essentially, which is a lemon herb chicken or something, lemon and pepper chicken or something.
I was there for the chicken. Is some real dog ate my homework.
Right. Okay. I can't defend it. I'm not going to carry on with this one. And another Clipper who appears to have behaved himself and is back in the bubble, Patrick Beverley. Montrezl Harrell is still out. You guys concerned at all with their absences from the Clippers' ability to roll into the season at full pace?
No. Personally, I think the Clippers are, you can make a strong argument, they're the deepest team out of the contenders. So, no, I don't. And I don't think they'll really need that full depth until the latter stages. So, for me, I don't think it bothers them at all.
I mean, how important are they to this Clippers roster and their long-term success, Josh?
They're massively important to the identity of the team. I don't think there's a team in the league really that is defined as much by their personality, the overall personality of the team, as much as the Clippers. And I think those are some big components towards that. This is massively unprofessional, but I am going to go back to the previous subject, and then we're going to go back to the Clippers because I didn't get the chance. I didn't get the chance to also note that Lou Williams had two either girlfriends or wives at the same time. So I think there is a liberal attitude towards his relationships with females. So anyway, just to end that point. But yeah, the Clippers' identity is so hard-nosed and energetic and fierce and violent and physical that yeah, they already have that in terms of depth, but those guys are some big components.
Yep, they certainly are. One guy who's going to be missing for the foreseeable future, possibly the entire bubble experience. Over in the Eastern Conference, it's the Pacers. Sabonis, he has plantar fasciitis in his left foot, which he's had to leave the bubble for medical treatment. This can be the sort of thing that stays with you for a long time. I remember Tim Duncan and tried to play through one season, and it really hampered his abilities. And obviously, Tim Duncan is a whole other echelon above Sabonis. No offense to Sabonis. The Pacers can't really catch a break. I'm kind of worried for them with this sort of half in, half out Oladipo position. Josh, where does this put the Pacers' chance of going deep in the playoffs?
It completely removes it. I think that, like you said, I'm getting some kind of early to mid 2000s Portland Trailblazers vibes from the Pacers. You know, continuous bad luck with their key players getting injured. And I do just personally believe that removing Sabonis from the picture will remove any chance of a deep run in the East.
So with that in mind then, Nick, do you think that Oladipo's decision as to whether or not he does play will be influenced by the situation, essentially, because is it worth him risking quite a serious injury he had, like that he's rehabbing, still not back up to full speed, although he's looking pretty close? Do you think it's worth the risk of playing in these games without a full strength Pacers team?
I think it's dependent on two things: how he feels and what the team looks like. If they play the first 3-4 games and it is very obvious that they're not performing, I think that influences his decision, as does only he knows how his body's holding up, how he feels. If he feels 100%, I don't. He's a young guy still. I think he'll try and play for everything.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair. Let's quickly then move on to another bit of news. I think we've got a frozen Nick in a beautiful image of his face right there. He's one of our most handsome members of the team. Have we got him back yet? Here he is. He's back.
There's like so I was just saying, one thing I noticed with the Pacers during the season is like there's an inverse relationship between the output of Turner and Sabonis. If one is putting up numbers, the other isn't, because they take up a lot of the same positions. They play a similar role, not on defense but on offense. So I think you'll see more out of Turner for sure, but obviously cumulatively that's still less than having both those guys. So
no, I think that's fair. I'm struggling to see. It certainly reduces their potential of doing anything in the postseason. Sabonis is an all-star. Oladipo is obviously the star player, but the way that Sabonis has risen to his sort of current status has been phenomenal. Let's talk about the Knicks. I hate talking about the Knicks. Nick, you're wearing a Knicks jersey. It's been announced Tom Thibodeau will be the Knicks coach, contractually at least, for the next 5 years. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition, we don't know yet. He was with the franchise for 12 years as an assistant in the 90s. He's also previously been the head coach of the Chicago Bulls during a relatively successful, sort of 2009 to 11-12 sort of era when Derrick Rose still had functioning knees. He also managed to get the Timberwolves to their first playoff spot in a long time, a couple of seasons back. But he's perhaps most famous for mismanaging players' minutes and the Jimmy Butler trade request. Are you excited that this guy's taking over? What's your take on it?
So he was not my choice for who I want to see. My choice would have been Kenny Atkinson. I think with the roster the Knicks have and the stage of rebuilding they are, he would have been a perfect choice with what we saw in Brooklyn. That said, and I also actually think Mike Miller should have had a stronger shout as well, based on what he actually achieved, which kind of went under the radar a bit because obviously the team was bad anyway. But he actually turned around quite considerably a team that was like laughably bad under Fizdale at the beginning of the year into a simply bad team by the end of the season. It's interesting for a number of reasons. And me and you were talking about this the other day, Mike, in terms of Tibbs went on a tour learning from other coaches during his time off, which shows a level of humility and willingness to learn that I'm going into his tenure with the team with an open mind in terms of what he is hoping to achieve and how he hopes to achieve it. I think I'd be surprised if he came in all guns blazing with all the stuff he's been criticised for in the past. But crucially, he will be reunited with Taj Gibson, which is like a crucial flux capacitor of the NBA. And I'm not sure the NBA is the same without those two being united. And crucially, for editorial reasons, I'm halfway through a piece for the Double Clutch website on the 99 Knicks. And in perfect editorial timing, Thibodeau was actually an assistant coach with the Knicks for that 99 run.
There we go. Get them clicks. Good timing on the content. Josh, do you think, the saying a leopard never changes his spots, do you think it's possible that Tibbs has evolved as a coach that doesn't run his players into the ground? I mean, I remember the story about when Deng was traded to the Cavs, and they said they had, they thought they bought a car with 40,000 miles on the clock, and then they looked under the bonnet and it had done 90,000. So what do you think he's going to do differently this time? Can he do anything differently?
It's hard to answer that question specifically, but firstly, I think that there is a bit of recency bias in the perception of Thibodeau. There's a lot on both sides that's very much justified, but I think that a lot of the kind of horror shows that he's experienced in recent years has kind of made people forget about the obvious success with the 08 Celtics, and then is obviously very successful winning tenure in Chicago. But if you ask a Timberwolves fan, then they'll tell you that the game has passed him by, and the guy's too old school. He runs his players into the ground, as you mentioned. He just hasn't adapted as the game has developed. But like Nick said, he's clearly shown a willingness to learn in recent time. And if you listen to the guy speak, he eats, he breathes basketball. So we'll see. I mean, it could go either way, but at the moment, I think the general perception is that he is a bad hiring.
So I think I like Tibbs. I know that he has got faults, obvious, clear, plain faults, but in terms of establishing a culture and a team identity, he takes these strong characters and just builds around them. I mean, that Bulls team was a force to be reckoned with, and they, as so many teams have, just ran into LeBron James. That Timberwolves team looked like it was on the cusp of doing something decent, and they just didn't get the chance because Jimmy Butler wanted out of there because, hey, it's Minnesota, it gets cold. But I think it's a good signing for them, because he has the opportunity to go somewhere which has had a toxic culture for essentially 20 years almost, and try and establish something new. And he's got the force of character to do that. And there's some young moldable guys there. You've got the guys like Taj who know Tibbs' system and will be on his side immediately. I think there's an opportunity to build something there. Let's move on. The NBA isn't the only season that's about to start. In fact, well, it's the only one that's about to start. The WNBA started on Saturday, tipped off at 5 p.m. Beautiful time for us. My other half was confused as to why LeBron James was relegated to an iPad and Sabrina Ionescu was on the big screen. So Sabrina made her long-awaited debut for the New York Liberty. She's, for those people who don't know, she's a phenomenal college player, #1 draft pick in this year's WNBA draft. And it was her first game in an expected loss to the Seattle Storm. She had 12 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. She shot quite poorly, about 25% if I recall. Went 0 for 8 from the three-point line, but she played a team-high 34 minutes and looked relatively comfortable on the floor. Josh, what did you think of this performance?
Well, it reminded me of something, and if any of the audience has seen, I bang on about it enough. If any of the audience has seen The Wire, Ionescu's debut reminded me of Marlo Stanfield's arrival, and the Storm was the Barksdale organization. They saw a new threat to their territory, which is obviously the WNBA in this case, and they wanted to make sure they did everything in their power to let this young gun know what the pecking order is. They absolutely swarmed her, they rushed her, they doubled her at times, and they really halted any kind of fluidity that we got used to seeing from her in the college game. But the better she gets, the more she'll see that sort of attention, the more she'll be able to cope with it. But also in that game, Stewart was unreal anyway, so it would have taken some effort for that rookie to usurp her.
If you're not already, WNBA League Pass is $16.99 for the whole season. That's dirt cheap, phenomenal. Definitely go and get that. Hugh, do you think there's talking about Hugh, I've got him on my note here, he's not even on the thing. Hugh's done a guide to the WNBA season over on Sky Sports, so I'd suggest you go and check that out too. Gives you some sort of key themes for the season, some key players involved. Nick, do you think there's any potential downside to the WNBA season, which so often, well, it plays through the summer when the other female leagues around the world are not playing and when the NBA is not playing? Do you think there's the potential that with the bubble going on now that it detracts from the WNBA at all?
I actually think it's really interesting, the two leagues coexisting in the same space in terms of viewing times and attention. And I think it could, particularly just with what's going on in the world, it could end up being a positive thing, because it creates very healthy debate and conversations around interest in women's basketball. And I mean, we're talking about Sabrina's debut and how much she struggled from the floor, for example, which kind of really shows you what a good place the WNBA is in terms of the standard of play. And I think fans are increasingly, even if people haven't been a fan of women's basketball historically, are starting to tune in and see, actually, this is a really entertaining product and brand of basketball that's being played here. So I think with the political conversations going on at the moment, I think under normal circumstances in any other year, I would suggest it was probably would take away from the ratings of the WNBA. But given us our current circumstances, that a lot of people in different countries around the world are going back into lockdown in various locations, they probably have more time potentially. And the two leagues increasingly getting mixed in terms of news as well. You saw Kyrie Irving come out today with a story. I think it was $1.5 million I read as a fund for any WNBA players who were going to sit out the season for like either health or political stance reasons. So I think the blurring of basketball news between men's and women's basketball is also very healthy.
And it's a good point you make there about Kyrie, because we've seen the reigning MVP Elena Delle Donne opt out, and there was on the Players Tribune there was an emotional and heartfelt sort of letter about her decision. She deals with Lyme's disease. The Kyrie thing can only be good, and I agree. Like the more people are talking about this, the more exposure it gets, the more interest it's going to generate. One thing I will say though, a knock at NBAstore.eu and Fanatics UK, you've got no WNBA merch at all. Please, I really want an orange hoodie. Can you just sort that out? They are a very political league as well and support the players politically. We've had the league's comment on is it the Chicago Sky's part owner who came out with comments which were not favourable. I don't know how to say it without just slandering someone. And then the NBA and the WNBA and the players stepped up to defend the position. The entire season is being dedicated to Breonna Taylor, who was obviously tragically murdered by 3 police officers. This is an activist league, and in many ways, is ahead of the NBA in terms of the empowerment it gives players. Is that fair, Josh?
Yeah. Some would argue that that from a audience level they have less to lose than the NBA as athletes, but they have been very firm. They've been very direct with their messaging. You saw people walk off the courts. You've seen people turn their backs. You've seen the messaging around Breonna Taylor. There's and I think this is an ongoing thread with the WNBA. They have been loud, they've been proud in what they believe in, and then when someone does, and just to let you know, I am willing to slander a racist, Mike.
I couldn't remember the specific comments.
Yeah. They dragged her. The entire league, every player in the league was willing to speak out against them, and that was good to see. So. Yes, there have been a very borderline unified message in the WNBA and its players. So it's been good to see.
Agree. So let's move on from the league as a whole and the current day. So we're going to move to a new segment called Talking on D. It's this week's topic inspired by our discourse on Discord. If you're not already, go and join us. Discord.me/doubleclutch. We had a conversation about players who should have their number retired but haven't. It came off the back of the Kevin Garnett interest in purchasing the Minnesota Timberwolves, because as soon as he's refused to have his number retired by the current owner Glenn Taylor, as soon as the new ownership's in, that number's going up in the rafters. Vince Carter in Toronto was mentioned. That's an obvious one. And there was even a shout for him sort of to have his jersey from New Jersey jersey retired. And it brought about a conversation about what you need to do to have a jersey retired, because obviously Vince Carter didn't win, left on bad terms, but had such a huge influence on basketball in the country. You can go check out The Carter Effect on Netflix for just a taste of that. And there were some great suggestions for guys who should have a jersey retired and hadn't. I just wanted to come to you guys and see if there was anyone in particular you thought falls into this category. So Josh, is there anyone for you that stands out, and why they stand out?
There's someone that stands out in terms of the interesting conversation, because, when you talk about retiring a jersey, it's a very different discussion to kind of, I don't know, for example, Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame, in the sense that it's not about contribution to the league, it's about contribution to a team. And often it has a lot to do with their relationship to the fans. So I think that Ray Allen is the most interesting conversation for me, because the argument, of course, is that he could get his jersey retired. He had a difficult career in that respect, because he was a huge part in the Boston 08 championship run. He hit probably the biggest shot in franchise history for the Miami Heat. And then he spent years outside of contendership, but offered great services to two other franchises. So ultimately, maybe he probably has to settle for a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame due to his tour de force in He Got Game. But I think that he's a very interesting conversation, but ultimately I think he may not get it just because of his burnt bridges.
Well, this is one of the interesting conversations that came up about Ray Allen is where do you associate his career as being? What's the first team that comes to your mind? Because I remember this took place on a Slack conversation about a long time ago now, or probably pre-Christmas. So you obviously remember him as a Celtic, as a member of the 08 champions. Nick, I expect, if I recall correctly, you remember him as a Sonic.
Yeah.
And for me, I remember him as a Buck.
It's an ace thing.
I think of that lineup with him and Rashard Lewis in Seattle. That's kind of my first thought when I think of Ray Allen.
I just think of the on the rim, parallel, horizontal, legs in the air. But before he was known as being just a shooter, and he was a dominant athlete as well. It's crazy, because for me it's about it's obviously impact, but it's longevity with a particular franchise that plays into it. Nick, is there anyone for you that stands out?
Yeah, so on Discord we were talking about teams who actually had never retired any numbers, and one of those teams is the Clippers, which is undergoing a real kind of rebranding exercise after the Donald Sterling nonsense they went through. And now they have, for all intents and purposes, everything you read about Steve Ballmer. He seems like a great owner, really trying to turn that culture around. And I think it would be really healthy for that team to look back at some of the players they've had. And obviously, people will think of Lob City guys immediately, but who are still active. So I'm not going to choose those guys. But Elton Brand during the early 2000s was an absolute monster for the Clippers. He really scared teams in the playoffs. He was 20 plus and 10 plus every single night. He was a two-time All-Star. And you have to remember the bar is 0 for guys getting their jersey retired for the Clippers. So I think it's really important for that franchise to set a bar culture-wise and build on their history.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Elton Brand was one of my shouts for the Clippers above the current, the active but key members of that Clippers team that had to go through the transition from Donald Sterling to Steve Ballmer. The guy for me is an interesting one because he's actually refused to have it retired, and he won't have his jersey retired until the NBA does the right thing and expands back into Seattle. And it's Gary Payton. I completely respect the fact that he declined the OKC offer to retire the jersey. He's a Sonic. He's not a Thunder, and he's just got longevity. He's got the individual awards with Defensive Player of the Year. He's just an all-round NBA superstar, and yet he's not. He's slept on now, I think, and he is someone who should be remembered. And I just wish there was a team in Seattle, to be honest. But absolutely, if there is, the day they do that, that number 20 is going into the rafters. Cheers,
Glenn. I agree, Charles.
Just to throw another element to this conversation is, and this is what I was bringing up on the Discord as well, is there's some really interesting guys that we'll have to wait and see. Guys like Carmelo Anthony, who pretty much split his prime years 50-50 between the Nuggets and the Knicks, but didn't really win enough with either to be a sort of no-brainer jersey retirement. So it's interesting with guys like that, whether that plays into those franchises' decisions when those guys call it quits.
For me, I mean, how many times did Melo get the Knicks to the playoffs? Am I right in thinking it was once? And that was the season he joined. There must have been another time.
It was more than once. I couldn't tell you.
It's just not a lot, though.
2012 was the only one good run they had.
It's just I don't know, and I get that the retirement of a jersey is an individual honour, but for some reason I still take team performance and how well they performed. How far they got, which obviously the Knicks have struggled with for quite a while. I'm going to stop there before I start winding you up. Okay, so let's quickly move on from that bit. If you want to join the Discord, please feel free to do so. We're getting close to 100 members now. Shout out to Sambo Evo, Adam JC, and House of Raptors who joined recently. We're going to jump on to some listener questions now. First one is from Spurs Stan since '99. Star, no, that's not a star. It's an asterisk. Who is the most likely? I can't even read the question. Who is most likely to be the next player to visit a gentleman's club? This is off the back of the Lou Williams conversation from earlier. Josh, I think we're going to be unanimous in this.
I've already said Alex Caruso.
You said Alex Caruso. You remember that? Okay, we're not going to be unanimous. Nick, I know where you're going.
Well, as we talk, Chandler Parsons is in a strip club right now. I'll guarantee it.
Current player.
Yeah. Current player. Are we going in bubble or outside?
In bubble. He's got yeah.
So I'm sticking with the beard.
Yeah.
The man lives a lifestyle.
Yeah, James Harden. I'll go. Yeah, by the way, have you seen him with his face mask on over his beard? It's crazy.
Yeah, incredible.
It's crazy. Amazing.
Did you see he accidentally wore a police endorsing mask as well? Yes. He didn't know the meaning of it and got in a lot of bother on Twitter about it. Yeah,
I didn't actually clock that. I'm going to have to go Google after this. My bad. Second question from Spurs Stan. Do the Wizards have any chance of getting past the Nets and to the playoffs, Josh?
Nope. I think it's too much of an ask. Mm-hmm. That said, health permitting, I think that they'll comfortably make it next year. I think maybe even like 4th or 5th seed. I have good hopes for them as they build towards a kind of more cohesive roster, and hopefully, if, like I said, health permitting, they have Wall and Beal at full strength. So I think they'll be comfortably in there next year, but this year it's way too much of an ask at this point.
That roster, you're right, at full health could do some damage. Nick, same for you? No chance?
No, but I would like it for, as I was talking about earlier, the sake of Rui Hachimura, who I would encourage all listeners to Google the extent of his injuries he suffered this season. It will make you wince and feel like a different human being after you've read it. So for his sake, I wish they did have a chance, but no. But my only Wizards thing I will throw in is I throw in Ish Smith as one of the most watchable journeymen in the NBA.
No, I think that's fair. They're not going to catch them. They're 6 games back. They do play on Sunday at 7 p.m. So there's a potentially big matchup there between, no offense to any Nets or Wizards fans, but probably the worst 2 teams in the bubble at the minute, just because their rosters have been decimated. Question from the legend that is Ginger Shack: Will the Sixers become a force with Ben Simmons at power forward? Nick.
So we talked about this a little bit last week, and I still maintain I think the Sixers' best opportunity this playoffs, whether that defines them as being a force or not, we'll see. But this Ben Simmons playing power forward is the best version of this team. I think he, strangely enough, the team sometimes look better without either Simmons or Embiid historically. And I think, strangely, they'll actually work better as a power forward center combo where each of the gravity they bring in those roles will grant them more space to work with individually. So I think this is their best look.
Is it similar for you then, Josh, as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think it could work out. You obviously, there's a lot depending on the chemistry that has sometimes been called into question and the fit between the two from a basketball point of view. But one of the reasons Simmons himself has been able to cope with his lack of shooting over the last few years is his ability to carve out opportunities for himself. Carve out space, his ability to overpower smaller defenders and then beat people off his first step that are bigger than him. He can create avenues to the hole for himself, and I think at the 4 he can definitely do that. He can use his power and speed over the appropriate mismatches. So I think so, Ginger Shaq.
I mean, this team has a super high ceiling in terms of potential. They were my pick pre-season to come out of the East. One of the problems I have with the question is that it's the supposed rigidity of the positions, the idea of him being a power forward, and maybe that's me going, in my day, a power forward was X, Y, Z, when now, let's just face it, everyone wants to play a position, a style, and Simmons kind of fits that mold. I get that it gives them additional floor spacing and offense, which they sorely missed from last year's team with the absence of JJ Redick, who went in free agency. They lost Landry Shamet in the trade for Tobias Harris. But I think the biggest place it improves them is defensively, because a lot of the NBA offense now is predicated on ball handler, big man, pick and roll to create mismatches. And what you've got here is on defense, Ben Simmons is one of the best defenders in the league. He is an all defensive talent, and he can guard 1 through 4 easily, sometimes even 5s he can take. What you're essentially doing is taking that or limiting that offensive tactic completely, because if you go into a 1-4 pick and roll, you're going to be facing Ben Simmons, and no, people aren't going to want to do that. It's going to slow the tempo of another team's offense. It's going to disrupt it, and I love the idea of that. It also means that if he is playing close to the basket defensively, there are a few more possessions a game where he is going to snare a rebound and then turn and go, because I don't see his offensive role changing too much. I haven't been able to. This is what I was talking to you earlier about, Josh, when I was saying, does anyone know where to get the advanced stats for the scrimmage games? Because I want to see what his usage rate is like. I want to understand how this is changing his position. Sorry, Nick.
I completely agree, Mike. And how I think about the Sixers is, I feel like in transition, his position is exactly the same. He'll run with it because he's outside of like Giannis and LeBron. There's not many more people who are more unstoppable than him in the open court. But in the half court is where he'll play more what we think of as a power forward.
So we're expecting elbow post-ups and Jokic pass sort of offense.
More in terms of he'll be roaming the baseline, or depending on matchups, which is, again, it's another tool in their arsenal for, do they put, if he's playing alongside Matisse Thybulle, for example, that's 2 incredibly versatile defenders that are kind of really tough to play against. So it just gives them an extra look, I think. And I think what you were alluding to earlier, Mike, is something I feel passionately about in terms of how good a defender Ben Simmons is. Often gets overlooked by the silly fact that he doesn't shoot threes very much. So
he's trying now.
He just needed lower ceilings, I think.
Lower ceilings and brighter lights.
No crowds.
Yeah, maybe if he starts making them now, that would be a really interesting study in terms of when they start introducing the crowds back in.
There's no doubt about it. People will be daring him every game to shoot a free constantly. So no matter where he goes across the country, he gets dared by hundreds of guys, heckled constantly. And there's only a certain amount you can block that out. And I think that definitely it could play a factor psychologically in his willingness to shoot the ball.
And the the weird thing about his lack of 3-point shooting, I should say, is like his form isn't the worst. So it's not like a Markel Fultz scenario where you look at it and you're like, oh wow, that's why he doesn't shoot. He kind of like
Gilchrist.
Yeah, he kind of, when he shoots, it actually looks okay. So.
Okay, final question. Matt, Suns fans UK. Which of the current playoff teams will be the biggest disappointment in the restart? You can't include the Nets. That's not fair. Nick, who have you got as potentially the biggest disappointment?
I was going to say Orlando just because I don't think they have enough to do anything once the playoffs start. But them being a disappointment would imply we're expecting more from them. So I think I will actually go for Utah, which was a team I highlighted last week as being someone I was interested to watch. And what I've seen, I haven't particularly liked. So I think it may be another year where Utah finishes reasonably high, but disappoints. And let me just say as well, we're any prediction, good or bad for a team, where it feels like a very uneducated guess because we're doing it on games that don't mean anything. But yeah, picking a team, it's going to be Utah.
Josh, for you?
I guess for mine, it's more of a zoomed out answer, not based on kind of people already being locked into what's happened recently. But the Nets, generally speaking, are going to be a huge disappointment in the sense that they're nowhere near what people would have expected at this point of the season.
You're not allowed to pick the
Nets.
Answer? Yep, you can't pick the Nets. You can't include the Nets. That's not fair. That was part of the question.
Right, you can't expect me to listen constantly, Mike.
It's like school. You've got to read the whole question before you write your answer.
Show your workings. I'm going to go with the Orlando Magic then, just from a home court point of view. I just think that it's going to be like the host team of a football World Cup going home in the group stages. Yeah,
I think the Magic is an obvious choice. Offensively, they struggled all year. It's not seemed to have got any better in these scrimmages. I had the Pacers down with the uncertainty around Oladipo and the absence of Sabonis. And then I agree with Nick. For me, it's the Jazz with Bogdanovic out. That floor shrinks. If Mike Conley doesn't shake up his form from the previous part of the regular season, then this could be a short restart for them because they struggled massively on offense last year. And losing Bogdanovic, who basically is the perfect example of a guy who gets paid a boatload of money for being able to do one thing alone. I think that's going to be huge for them. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's move on quickly to the final section, which is games of the week. These are the games you should be watching. Josh, what is your pick and why?
Predictably, I'm choosing the Bucks versus Celtics on Friday, a widely agreed contender versus one of the teams that people consider to be a sleeper in this specific environment because of their age.
Josh, you don't have to sound so sad when you pick your own team.
Yeah, you know the exact reason why I'm taking that tone. I'm avoiding homerism at all costs. So that could be an excellent prelude to playoff basketball, but we'll see.
Nick, who have you got?
I picked the no-brainer option, which is on Thursday, 30th, 2 a.m. We have the Lakers versus the Clippers. We have the two big stars for the Lakers in J.R. Smith and Dion Waiters, which I think everyone's watching with bated breath, versus Paul George and Kawhi. Obviously, I'm talking about LeBron and AD.
No, solid choice again. I've gone slightly curveball on this one. I've gone Heat versus Nuggets, two teams that are sort of the Heat especially are playing above where people thought they would be this season, and they are putting together a fantastic culture and a fantastic team full of great young role players. And then you've got the Nuggets. I'm loving the way that we talked at the top of the show about the sort of stuff they're trying to do. The idea of skinny Jokic running point guard, all that kind of thing is fantastic. I'm keen to see them sort of experiment with bigger lineups in a real meaningful game. Not surprised no one picked the Wizards versus the Nets. I've got a feeling that all of our games are on Sky Sports Arena. So there you go. There's a free plug for Sky. So we'll close the show out now. Thanks to everyone for listening or watching, however you are consuming this. We appreciate it. Thank you for all the follows that we've had. In fact, since we announced we were coming on to Twitch, we've had Daff926, Walati, the Lacondo. How do you say these names? RB82 Baz, Clegg2995, Knock on Wood, Charlie Eep 90. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening and following. If you're not on social media already, following us at Double Clutch UK. Check us out everywhere and get involved. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.
See you later, Bubble Boys.
Cheers, everyone.